Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to a question of property. How are we all today?
Wonderful.
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. And
Isolated.
we have isolated. We're going to go from left to right. So we've got Paul there, Paul Mahoney, head of Nova Financial Group, Stefano Lucatello, who is the senior partner at Kobalt Law, international property lawyers. Morning. And we've got John Howard as well, property expert with more than 40 years experience and author of 3 books now, including the latest one, Buying and Selling at Auction. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Questions
Morning.
to get on with today, obviously due to COVID-19 being obviously at the forefront of everybody's mind. So we will go with our question to Paul first, which I'm sure is relevant to everybody as well. Has revenue slowed for your business due to COVID-19? That one's for Paul.
Yeah, so well, I think revenue has slowed for all businesses aside from online businesses at the moment. I saw Wayfair jump by 40% yesterday, which is pretty crazy. Everyone fitting out their homes. But yeah, look, I think businesses like ours, services businesses that people have obviously got more important things on their mind at the moment. Everything's kind of gone on pause a little bit. In saying that, though, we still do have people buying properties at the moment. A lot of what we do is new build and off-plan type properties, so it's still very conceivable to be transacting on those types of properties. Obviously, more difficult second-hand ones, but it is still happening. People are still buying in the right circumstances, but yeah, I think things have slowed down undoubtedly, and I suppose the length of which that carries on is yet to be determined.
Absolutely. How is that? How have you found it, guys? John and Stefano, has it slowed down for your businesses?
Well, sorry,
John.
you go first, Stefano.
It's certainly slowed down for us lawyers because not only are people not buying English property, but they're certainly not buying foreign property. They're certainly not thinking about foreign property as a first thing. I mean, people are thinking about surviving from hand to mouth and surviving, the COVID virus. They're not really putting any effort into anything else, really. And I think any business except for an online business where food is supplied or anything like that, I think is suffering. Yeah.
And John?
Well, I have to say, I've never, ever felt sorry for a solicitor, and I still don't. They're not really helping themselves in this market. I mean, we've got a number of sales on the go at the moment, and the negativity these solicitors are portraying to their clients is absolutely pathetic. I'm not talking about Stefano, of course, because he's a very positive guy, but the average solicitor, my goodness, they're too scared to cross the road. It's ridiculous. And we're trying to push sales through still with delayed completions and things like that. And some solicitors are fine. My solicitor's great. But I've worked with him for 30 years, he should be. But the majority we're dealing with on the other side of transactions are very weak and worried about their own shadow.
And what is the government saying in terms of what can be done at the moment? Because
well, that's a good point. That's a very good point, Lucia. The government is saying that if the property is vacant, there's no reason why people can't exchange contracts and move in. And these solicitors are advising their clients not to do so. However, we did have 3 completions last Friday on a project of ours, and they all exchanged and completed on the same day, which was great.
Lucia, okay. I have to say to you, in defence of the solicitors, that the Law Society and the Solicitors Regulation Authority has given us clear guidance, 2 sets of guidance in the last 3 weeks, as to how we are to behave as solicitors, what we're supposed to do, and what we're not supposed to do, what we have to try and avoid. So if people haven't exchanged contracts at the moment, the Law Society is telling us that we should be pushing it back.
Total utter madness.
But John, that's all we can do. We are regulated by the SRA and the Law Society.
I don't care how regulated you are. That's crackers, and solicitors need to bloody, realise there's other people in this that need exchanges and need completion. People want to move home.
Yeah,
if it's empty, there's no reason why you can't.
Well, no, that's not a problem. the Law Society says that where the property is empty, where there isn't a chain, where the people don't need to be in contact with each other, then completion can go ahead.
Exactly.
But in many cases, it can't be done.
Some other people in the Law Society who are reading that obviously are reading differently to you, Stefano, which is crazy. Very negative.
We've all got to adopt a common sense attitude, and appropriate actions need to be taken, because if we are in contact with each other, or the risk of contacting with each other, you can't do it. But if the house is empty, or the completion is due because the chap's maybe renting it and he's going to buy the rental property and he's in there, then no problem. But if there is risk of contact, then Lucia, we have to be careful. We can't do anything else but be regulated.
Absolutely. Well, that's it.
I think a lot of the time it's also how it's communicated, that sometimes in some cases asking, telling clients to delay completions is a good idea. For example, at the moment, it's almost impossible to progress a mortgage. So we're having to get approval through a lot of developers and agent solicitors to give us more time, because we've pretty much come to a halt. Where in other cases, it's a very legally jargoned letter that's sent to the client. They have absolutely no idea what it means, and it scares them. And I don't think that's useful whatsoever.
There's no point in sending a letter to a client, and if he doesn't understand it, it's all right us understanding it, but we have to translate things into good English so that the client knows exactly what he or she can do.
All I'm saying is some of them could be a lot more positive than they are and help out poor old developers, people like me, people who are trying to get people moving into their new homes.
I think the thing is, in general, there's a lot of fear and sort of scaremongering around the whole subject of COVID-19. Yeah. So perhaps if, a little bit more of a positive spin on things would certainly help the general.
John, you mentioned that you've never felt sorry for a solicitor, but I'm quite sure that many people are very, very seldom felt sorry for developers either.
I resisted the temptation, Paul. I resisted the temptation to say that.
Okay, right. We're going to move on, but I think that did raise a really good question about mortgages as well, and how people might have had one secured prior to all of this COVID-19 business kicking off, and then but they're going to come to 3, 6, who knows how many months down the line, and potentially not be able to do that. Is that something that is a concern for any of you guys?
Well, I've had a few clients ring me already and email me already who have got properties in Spain, France and Italy. Some are resident over there, some are not resident because they use the houses as holiday homes, and they've asked me the question, what will happen if I can't pay the mortgage? And at the end of the day, what will happen is that the banks will have an amount of leniency. In Spain, for example, if you're a resident, not a holiday owner, as a leisure place, but as an actual resident, they're giving 3 months of a vacation on your mortgages. That's only if you are resident in Spain. In Italy and France, nothing has happened like that yet. But the outcome will be that if you fail to pay your mortgage, the bank will foreclose on you either directly or by selling the loan on to somebody else. I had one instance this week of a Spanish bank having sold the loan to a loan shark, a company. Wow. A company which is now threatening to take possession of the property and to charge something in the region of 46% interest. And so the client is now worried as to what he or she can do. The idea is that you should contact them. It doesn't matter whether it's an English bank or a foreign bank. I think the guys will agree. The clients should contact the bank at the first instance. They should make the bank aware of the fact that they can't repay that month's payments. Enter into some form of repayment scheme. The bank will maybe give them a 3-month deferral, but the interest will continue ticking in that period. That's important to note. And then come back in 3 months' time. But keep talking to your lender, whether it's a first lender or a second lender. Keep talking to them, whether it's English or foreign, because if you don't, one guy said, what happens if I don't do anything? I said, well, if you bury your hand in the sand, head in the sand, then they will come after you. They will sell the loan on, or they will come after you with some form of debt recovery.
The worst thing anyone can do is bury their head in the sand. It's madness.
Yeah. Whether that be with lenders, developers, agents, communication is key. On the completions and mortgage side of things, the mortgage market at the moment in the UK is pretty much been put on pause. The main.
Sorry, Paul, could you just repeat that? It just glitched a little bit.
The mortgage market in the UK has pretty much been put on pause at the moment. the logic we've been given, we've obviously got an in-house brokerage and we advise on property as well. So we're on both sides, the mortgages and the kind of completion side. Lenders are being overrun with mortgage holiday inquiries. I'm not sure if anyone's tried to call their bank over the past couple of weeks, but time is significant. And of course, they're under-resourced as well. Everybody's working from home and these people aren't used to working from home and that sort of thing. So that's the main reason we're being given. Also, they're risk averse. So lots of pretty much the only mortgages that are being able to progress at the moment are very low loan to value mortgages. Where
I think that's, sorry, Paul, I think that's just glitched again. Just repeat the last
sorry.
sentence.
Pretty well the only mortgages that are being able to progress at the moment are very low loan to value mortgages. And that's because the lender isn't concerned about having to do a valuation. They're quite confident in paper valuations on low loan to values. For example, we have one going through at the moment at a 50% loan to value. Yeah. So, they can pretty accurately estimate, 400 grand property, they can lend 200 grand on that. They're not too concerned about that. But, 75% loan to value, which is usually what our clients go for buy-to-let, has all been put on pause.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much.
I don't think that's necessarily something to worry about because it just is the current scenario. And there's also no one to blame for it. It just is what it is.
That's debatable. That's debatable as well.
I don't think you can necessarily blame lenders for taking that stance.
No. I wasn't talking about them.
Mr. Trump will be blaming the Chinese.
Yeah, well, Mr. Trump's not always wrong, is he?
Moving on, we are going to go to Stefano now. We have another question here, a little bit more based at home in Italy. So this is from one of the clients that has been in touch. I'm selling my house in Yorkshire to then invest the net sale proceeds into my purchase in Italy. And then there's a few questions after that. What will happen once I exchange contracts in the UK and then complete the transaction? How will it work with the sale proceeds being used in Italy? And do contract chains exist under Italian law?
Well, the first thing to say, Lucia, is that you shouldn't be exchanging contracts if exchanging contracts is the right word, is the right definition, because it doesn't exist in Italy. We have a totally different system of law. It's a civil law system, a totally different system of law. It's not a common law system, so exchanging contracts doesn't exist. So the first thing to do is to exchange contracts in England, exchange contracts in England, and know that you're on a safe footing because you're actually going to sell. The next thing is that, as we all know, completion usually takes place within 30 days of an English completion, unless it's rushed through and there's something else to do much quicker. So you would not line up your completion in Italy before completion in England takes place. So if you have completion taking place, let's say on the 1st of April in England, you would not complete in Italy until, let's say, the 7th or the 10th, which means that if you're moving across in the meantime, traveling across, you'd have to stay in rented accommodation, or you'd travel down slowly and get there to Italy on the day for the day of completion to the notary's office. The monies will go from your lawyer in England. We do this regularly. One of us deals with the English side of things. One of us deals with the foreign side of things. So we move the money that comes in from the sale in England from one client account to the other. It goes out from me to Italy to the vendor, and the vendor's notary collects the money, and completion takes place in that manner. It's usually quite easy to stage, but there is no such thing as chains in Italy and foreign countries. It's only something that exists here. So make sure that you do your English side of things first, and then you can get on with the foreign side of things. It's usually the case that you can never hold a notary down to completion. He will tell you when he's ready to complete. So agree it 14 days after you've completed your English transaction.
Okay, and I suppose, like you said, make sure you've got a secure footing in terms of actually selling the property here as well.
Well, you wouldn't put a 10% deposit down on a property abroad until you had exchanged in England. Yeah, and even then, under present circumstances, if it's happening now, there could be a risk of it not happening. I've got a couple of clients who have delayed completions in France and in Spain, and they're saying force majeure and all sorts of other bits and pieces, and then we go into other realms of deciding whether it's valid or not. But be careful. I would say now that if you can, I would complete That means fully complete the sale of your English property. Know that you've got the money in the solicitor's client account, all of it, and then I would move forward to buy your property abroad.
And I'm assuming there'll be some great bargains going forward as well. I mean, if cash is king, isn't it, Stefano? If you're going out there with cash, presumably, you're going to get a serious deal.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got cash now, you can buy anywhere. And there will be, I reckon, in a month or two, there will be some great bargains to be had abroad, even more so than there are currently, because people will be in severe difficulty with paying the mortgages or wanting to get back to the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
absolutely. Great. Thank you very much, Stefano. We'll move on to John now.
Good.
This is a question for you.
Yes.
This person's written in and said they have a small commercial shop let out to a local hairdresser. They're saying that they can't afford the rent now. What would your advice be? Should I evict them? I imagine this is a very common situation going on at the moment.
Very charming landlord we've got there.
Yeah, sounds
charming.
Nice.
Very kindly. Okay, well, the good news for the landlord is that it's a hairdresser's, and the reason I say that is because as soon as the lockdown is over, the hairdressers are going to be the most busiest people in the world, in my view. So actually, I think in this circumstances, not always the same, certainly, but in this circumstances, I would personally support the hairdresser, not evict them, support them and explain to them you need double the rent in the next quarter, because they'll be back and they'll be earning money, they'll be working very late. So I wouldn't be giving them the rent-free period. I would just defer it and ask them to pay it perhaps over the next 3 quarters so they can catch up. So by the end of the year, you're no worse off than you are. You've got all your rent, in other words. Now, I've got 1 or 2 larger commercial tenants at the moment, who I won't say who they are, but they're national tenants. Both of them, both of the big ones have said to me they're not paying whatsoever, which is very unhelpful considering, one, they're much bigger than me. Secondly, that they've had help by the government. They've had rates given to them and all sorts of different things, as have all the smaller ones as well, to be fair. But my view is, if I've got tenants, commercial tenants, so I've got a lot of them. If they're smaller than me, I'll help support them if I can. If they're bigger than me, they can definitely pay me. So
what's been your discussion with them then when they've said
not a lot? I said I'm not agreeing to a rent-free period and I want my money.
Right.
And they've said no. So I could go in after 21 days and take possession under terms of most commercial leases. Whether I'm going to do that or not, they'll just have to wait and see, won't they?
There's no deferral period, is there, John? There's no deferral period for a commercial lease. It's only for residential property.
Yeah, only for residential, yeah.
And sorry, just going back to the original question as well, John, we're sort of talking on the basis of the fact that this will continue for, 3 months, let's say. Or what if it doesn't? What if it's longer than that? It's 6 months, it's 9 months. Would you give the same
Lucia,
answer?
You need to calm down a bit.
I'm panicking, John. Help.
You need to relax. This will be out within 3 months. And the reason for that is
that's a fact,
the government can't let it go on any longer. Businesses in the UK, they need to survive in some way. The government will relax the situation. We won't be going to pubs and restaurants. Your husband won't be taking you out to a restaurant anytime soon, but he will be able to go to work and you'll be able to move around and go to work, I think, certainly within 6 or 8 weeks, I think.
Do you think, John, that we will go to a position where, as they have in Wuhan last night, where they reopened everything and they're now letting traffic through and people can walk and everything else? I don't see that coming sometime soon, especially with
I don't see that coming. I don't see that coming straight away. And I think London and the West Midlands are obviously very poor, but other are very bad at the moment. But other areas, I'm in sunny Suffolk, beautiful county. And here, yes, we've got a few problems. We've got a few deaths, unfortunately, but it's very different to some other areas which are highly, densely populated.
Right, but I suppose we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. We can't 100%.
But don't go worrying about it, Lucia.
I'm not.
Well, the current furlough scheme that the government's brought into place is quite generous, in my opinion. And I would have to think, and I haven't seen the figures on this because I don't think the portal's even up yet, but I would have to think that probably half the workforce is going to be put on furlough.
If not more.
That's a huge cost.
Yeah, they haven't helped people like me.
Well,
you don't need help, John.
John, if you've got staff, so you can put people on furlough and they're going to
which I've done. I've done that with the estate agencies, yeah. So they help me in that respect, but they haven't personally helped me, have they? And it's people like you, me, Stefano, who are leading this country in terms of small entrepreneurs and what this country needs. And they need to support them better than they have so far. The banks, fortunately, I don't need to borrow any money, any loan from any bank to get me through, fortunately, God willing. But if I was, I know from friends who have tried to get these loans, it isn't easy. They want 3 years accounts. You can't borrow more than 25% of your turnover. They're not these banks aren't making it easy. And bear in mind, these banks are the same banks that we bailed out in 2008.
So let's just talking about borrowing as well. If I may give another question here to Paul, how do you think that the buy-to-let market is going to fare once all of this craziness is over and everybody's back out there again?
No, I think that's a bit of a crystal ball question. And anybody who tries to answer,
just ask John.
Into reading balls.
The one thing I would say, Paul, is that I think the buy-to-let market is actually similar to the stock market in many ways, in as much that even if it goes down a bit, because it's based on yields, rental yields and so on, it will come back, and it will come back higher and better over the next few years. So if I was in a buy-to-let situation, I wouldn't be very concerned. One, you can get three months interest holiday if you need it, and only take it if you need it. But also going forward, as I said, stocks and shares go up and down. All these panicking about the shares price down 30%, 40%, they all come back eventually. And the same with the buy-to-let market. I wouldn't be, as long as you've got a tenant who's paying, I wouldn't be terribly concerned.
I wouldn't agree with you, John. I think COVID-19 has caused us to go into a marketplace that we've never been in before, and to experience matters in a way that we've never experienced before. I think the whole landscape will change, whether you're a developer, whether you're a buyer, whether you're a lawyer, whatever. I think the whole landscape will change in the next 3 to 6 months for all of us, and all of us will have to change the way in which we work, in which we deal with business, and we deal with other countries. Because remember that we may come out of COVID-19 in 3 or 4 weeks' time, whatever you think it may be. I doubt it very much. But remember, other countries may not. So we may still be landlocked, if not, city locked, and we will have to deal with things in a different way.
But I understand that, and my caveat would be, as long as people haven't lost their jobs. But don't forget, if you've lost your job in the UK and you'll get support from the government, you can still pay your rent.
Well, I mean, what about all the people who've lost their jobs at Debenhams? They've gone into administration.
Don't get me wrong, there will be lots of casualties. But what I'm saying, if you've got a buy-to-let and you've got a tenant who is working, you haven't got too much to worry about. If you've got a development half finished, that's a totally different kettle of fish.
Well, if we could just head back to Paul there as well.
My question. Paul. That would be great, thanks. So I started off by saying it's a bit of a crystal ball question, and I think it is, because anybody who tells you they know the direction the market's going is being disingenuous. No one knows. That's the true answer. And the reality is, if you look at history, the media and the masses are almost definitely wrong. For example, if we look back at the last financial crisis, 2007, just before the last financial crisis, and if you ask, the bricklayer around the corner or anyone, if property is a good investment, they would have said yes. You're mad not to invest in it. It's taking off. It's never going to stop. And of course, that was the worst time to buy because it was just before the crash. But even still, if you'd have bought then, you still would have done quite well by now. If you then go a few years on, depending on the location, but let's say 2009, 2010, everybody was depressed. It was the worst time to buy property property, you can't make any money. Actually,
Sorry,
it was the
Paul,
best time to
just
buy.
repeat that once more because it glitched again.
Sorry.
That's
So 2009, 2010, it was the trough of the market. Everybody would have told you it was the worst time to buy because they've just experienced a downturn. But actually, it was the best time to buy. So I do somewhat agree with John in that buy-to-let is somewhat like the share market. However, it's a lot more robust than the share market.
Yeah, definitely.
Because people need a roof over their heads. People don't, especially in the right locations. If you're investing in desirable, centrally located properties with lots of employment facilities and amenities, those people do not disappear overnight. And for example, going back to that same example, 2008, 2009, or 2008 alone, the FTSE All Share Index fell by 32%, and the property market fell by 8% on average. The total downturn across the UK of the last financial crisis was 16% on average across the whole country, which, in my opinion, is relatively minimal. And that's why I agree with John in that 16% you can swallow. And unless you're selling at that point in time, you won't have even noticed. So that's why buy-to-let in the right properties that are rentable, regardless of the economic cycle, because again, jobs don't disappear, people don't disappear. If there's an abundance of employment and facilities in a particular location, your property will still rent.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can't go too far wrong. Even if you buy at the worst possible time, you should still do well over the mid to long term.
As long as you could kind of hang on to it for X amount of time. That's great. Thanks so much. Sorry, say that again.
So rentability is key. Making sure it's very attractive to the rental market, because the rental market is very different to the capital growth side of the coin.
And I suppose keeping a level head and not kind of panicking is always
yes,
helpful as well in these situations. That brings us to the end of this first show. Thank you very much, guys. Stefano, John and Paul for all of your input here today.
Pleasure.
If you've got any questions, you can email us, ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. That's ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. And we'll see you again next time. Thank you.